So this is an exercise in a style that we're going to see a lot in this course. Now that we know how to write functions, we're going to spend a lot of time writing functions because it gives us an easy way in a course like this of asking you to write sort of compact bits of code that obey a specification without having to write a full program. It also makes it easier for us to test things because instead of having to run a program that takes input or something, we can just call the function with different parameters. So the task is very similar to a previous exercise, which was to add up the squares of integers in a certain range. And the goal is to write a function in the middle. But before that, I want to talk about what's been set up for testing purposes. And this is all very similar. It's foreshadowing assignment 3. So assignment 3 is a file full of empty functions. And each function has a rigorous specification, and your job is to implement all of the functions. And in main, well, actually main is empty. And you're told in the assignment, you better use main to test out your functions to make sure that they all work. In this exercise, I've given a couple of basic tests, but one of the points that I want to prove is that we really have to do more testing than this. The whole point of writing a function is to have that small appliance. I want to make it so that when I write a function, stuff goes in and stuff comes out. And if all goes well, once I write the function and I make it work, nobody who uses it ever has to care about what it does inside the box. That's great. It means we don't have to worry about that. But that also means we have a certain obligation if we're writing the function to make it work correctly and be sure of that. Not just, oh, I tried it a couple of times and I think it works. No. I need it to work correctly in all cases. And it actually turns out that that's a really tough problem to solve in general. So for a program like this, we can do a lot of testing and maybe demonstrate that it works pretty much perfectly. In all cases, we might use it. In a huge piece of software, so think about the video player where you're watching this video, think about Connex, think about our testing database. In a huge piece of software, there's so many moving parts, so many things interacting that odds are big pieces of software like Connex or your web browser are full of bugs. There are things in them that don't work correctly and that we just can't catch by testing, even if we do millions and millions of tests. In huge pieces of software, typically the compile process involves automatically running millions of tests to make sure everything works. But even then, in a big piece of software, bugs can slip through. And that's the kind of thing that keeps programmers up at night. Because people that write big pieces of software sort of hope that maybe there are bugs. We can't prevent bugs from occurring in general, but hopefully they're at least non-destructive. I mean, maybe there are places where you click on the wrong button on Connex and you get an error message, and that's too bad, but it's still better to get an error message than to click the wrong button and, delete all of the data. And so at a certain point, it comes down to certainly we want to test everything, but we want to also hope that if any bugs slip through, they're sort of minor, they're just inconveniences. So what's happening here is the goal of the sum of squares function is that if I call the sum of squares function, the return value will be the sum of all squares in the range provided, including both endpoints. So this would be 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared. Which happens to be equal to 14. I've already pre-computed that. And if you want to test this code once it's done, the best way of doing it is to, by hand, compute the sum of squares that you expect and just verify that the function's output matches that. And down here, I would expect this to give me 6 squared plus 7 squared, which is equal to 85. And we'll look at the specification in a minute. And I also want to use this video to talk a bit about something interesting that happens with undefined values, with uninitialized data. We've already talked about how we should never assume that when we create a new variable and don't give it a value, that it has any particular default value. So for example, notice on line number 32 here, if I ask you, as of line 32, what is the value of this variable? We know already that the answer is random garbage. We don't know what it is. Maybe 0, but maybe not. And we shouldn't assume it has any particular value because it is uninitialized. I've mentioned in a Thursday lecture, it's sort of hard to demonstrate that it gives you values other than 0. But I actually could do that in the case of a function. Before we talk about that, let's talk more about this specification idea. So I've mentioned before that if all goes well when you're writing code, your code is self-explanatory. You don't need to write long comments explaining things. One place where we often see comments explaining things formally is when we write functions, because our goal is to make up a small appliance that anybody can use for the rest of eternity. And therefore, having a rigorous specification is good because it makes it easy for somebody who doesn't understand what the code inside the function actually does to use the function anyway. And so it's still the case that we might write a lot of self self-explanatory functions. But on assignments and things, you should get used to seeing things written up in this pretty formal style. A specification that clearly indicates what the parameters should be and indicates what the return value should be. So here, the sum of squares function takes values start and end, and it computes the sum of all squares in that range, including the value start, everything up to and including the value of end squared. And we know already from the sum of squares exercise from last week that we're probably going to want to loop for this. And then it says the return value well, actually, there are two possibilities. And this is one case where we need to do extra testing. We need to test to make sure we verify that both of these situations work correctly. So in the obvious case, if I give you two numbers, so for example, down here I gave 1 and 3, then if the start value is less than the end value, so if you have a range that makes sense, you just compute the sum of squares in that range. 1 squared plus 2 squared plus 3 squared. But there is this extra case here. What if for some reason I ask you for something ridiculous, like I give you a start value of 10 and an end value of 3? How do you count between 10 and 3? Well, do you count down or... No, in this case, it specifically says, if for some reason the value end is less than the value of start, return is 0. So this actually gives a sort of the requirement for what we might consider error checking. Your code in the function has to intercept a weird case like that and handle it a specific way. So we should handle that ourselves. When I start writing a function like this, often I like to write myself a shopping list to explain, to sort of put my thoughts in order. So first, test whether end is less than start. If so, return 0. Otherwise, use a loop to compute the sum of squares of start plus 1, all the way up to end minus 1, and then end. So having this shopping list here is great because there are a lot of moving parts, and if I write these comments, it makes it easier for me to sort of turn it into a fill-in-the-blank exercise. But before I do that, let's try compiling the template. So notice how this is a function that's supposed to return an int. Currently, it does literally nothing. So the contract with the outside world, the function signature, says here is a function called sum of squares. It takes a start value, an end value, both of them are ints, and it returns an int. And it clearly isn't keeping up its end of the deal. There is no return statement. But can I still use it? Can I call a function that doesn't have a return statement? And we'll see what happens if I compile it. It does give me a warning. It says control reaches the end of a non-void function. So we already saw that a void function is a function with return type void, and it does not have to return a value. In fact, it's not allowed to return a value. When the compiler talks about control, what it is referring to is a concept that when we execute our code, we go line by line. At each line, that particular bit of code has control over the processor. So we do that thing on each line. So the word control just means which line are we executing. If control gets to this point, so if it gets all the way to the end of a function, that means that there is no return value. So the question is, then what does the function return? And what's interesting is when you run a function that returns an int, whether or not it actually sends something back, you do get a number back from it. And if there's no return statement, you just get whatever random garbage was left over in the spot where the return statement would go. Just like if you declare a new variable and you ask for its value before you've given it a value. You just get whatever junk the last person left behind. So this is incorrect. This warning, if you get this on an assignment, you will lose marks. The compiler puts up with it and says, well, you're the boss. It's a dumb idea, but you're the boss. So let's try running it. Sum of squares between 1 and 3. 54 million. Okay. Sum of squares between 6 and 7. 41. So clearly, those are not the right answers. And we shouldn't be too surprised because we didn't write any code. It can't be that easy. Let's run it again. Okay, this time the sum of squares was, what is that, 1.8 billion. And then the second one was 43. We keep running it over and over. And each time we get these random numbers, or arbitrary numbers. They're not truly random, because you might notice that second number is always hovering in the 40s. So why is that? We don't really know or care. It's just a coincidence that it happens to be using a bit of memory that was already used by something storing the number 44. Who cares? It's just whatever junk was left over. And clearly, this is incorrect. And we should, of course, go write the function. That's the solution to this. But this is an example about how if you ask for data that you haven't provided, you just get whatever random junk was left behind by the last person. So this is an example of uninitialized and undefined data. All right. let's try writing the function. So I've written myself a shopping list here. The first thing I'm going to do is try and sort out this situation. And this is the thing I'm going to try here is a little bit odd when you first see it. And I'll go back at the end and show a different way of doing it that's a little bit more magnanimous. So I'm going to say if end is less than start, then return 0. That's it. And what we have to observe here is that this return statement, we only hit this return statement if this condition comes back true. As soon as you hit a return statement, no matter where you are in the function, as soon as you hit a return statement, the function ends. So if I ever get inside this if statement body, I will never leave. Well, I guess I'll leave because the function will end, but I'll never get down to line 31. The function ends right here. I really like this, the idea of an early return. If I just want to get out of here if something went wrong, this lets me do that. Now, if you don't like that, you could also use an if-else statement. Just put the rest of the function in the else clause. But I'm going to leave this and we'll see what happens. Okay, so otherwise, if I get down here to line 33, that means that this if statement did not come back with the answer yes. Because if it did, the function would have already ended. So if I get down here, it must be the case that the value of start is less than end. So here I'm going to set up my loop. I'm going to actually write a comment to explain to myself what I'm going to do. Set a variable end equal the start value, then count up to end, up to and including end. Adding n squared to my total at each step. To my total. Okay, in science, we don't want to use the first person. To the total at each step. You might notice that the great thing about like assignment specifications and things in a course like this is that everything has to be in the third person. You keep seeing places where it says, your instructor tried this, because I can't write, I did this, because that's a bit weird. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable called n equals start. And you might actually be able to write this by just using this variable and modifying it. And we've seen already that because this variable lives inside the scope of this function, you can modify it all you want and it won't hurt anything. I like having other variables though because I don't want to get confused. The variable called start has a very specific meaning, whereas a variable called n, that's a good sort of generic name to use for a counter of some kind. Okay, so while, and I guess I'm going to use a while loop, you can use a for loop for this, but while n is less than or equal to end. And I make a note to myself up here that, yeah, up to and including the value of end. Now, before I go further, I'm actually going to add my incrementation so that I don't forget it. N equals n plus 1. Okay, so then, at each step, I have to add n squared to my total. Okay, wait, what total? And maybe you can convince yourself, just like in the previous exercise we did about this, that I need a new variable here. I can't use n to store my total because n already has a job. So I guess I have to make up a variable for my sum. Int sum equals, okay, 0 at the beginning. Now at each step, I write sum equals sum plus n times n. Okay, so I've added n times n to my total. And I think that's all I have to do, except I get down to line 41 when the loop ends, and then I return my final sum. Okay, so let's give that a try. Now, what I want to talk about now is how do we test this? Well, we'll start, I guess, by just testing the two cases that came with the exercise, because those are easy, and I guess if they're wrong, then certainly there's a bug. All right, sum of squares between 1 and 3 equals 14. We already worked out that's correct. Sum of squares between 6 and 7, 85. So, okay, first issue. You can't just say, oh great, the function's correct, and then hand it in. We don't know that yet. We certainly know we're on the right track. And we know that it works in the way that we expect to use it, I guess the obvious way. But what about other weird cases? And we need to test all of them if we can. Now, we can't test every possible number in the universe. We can at least try and test some strange situations. And we often call these edge cases or pathological cases in computer science. Things that the function, unconventional uses of the function. Now, the sort of obvious one, I think, is that special case the function itself refers to. What happens if I ask for the sum of squares where the range is somehow inverted? And whether or not we can think of a logical thing to do here, the specification specifically says that if you get a situation like this, it's supposed to return 0. So I'm going to write that and we'll see what happens. We need to test this or we have no idea whether it works. We can't assume. A common issue that I have in all courses, this happens in my 4th year course too, is students will email me code and they'll say, do you think this works? And I'll write back and say, I don't know, did you run it? When you ran it, did it work? Or they'll have a bug in their code and they'll ask me about it, and I'll say, well, why don't you try, doing this? Try using extra variables, try using a loop. And they say, well, if I do that, will it work? And all I can say is, well, I don't know, you have to test it. I don't get to decide if code works. If I did, my job would be so much easier. I could do so much more in my day if I could just decide ex cathedra that code works. I can write bad code and just declare this code works. Unfortunately, I'm stuck just like everybody else. I'm a human being and I'm stuck having to trust my own testing ability to the best extent possible and just hope that I can test my code enough. The only way to know if the code works is to test it. So we'll do this, we'll compile, I guess we'll compile again because I lost track of that one. We'll run it. Okay, in this case it gives the answer zeros. That looks good. What about other edge cases? I can think of a few more. So what about this situation? The sum of squares between 7 and 7. Is that a range? Well, I think it is. It's a very small range. The sum of squares between 7 and 7 will just be 7 squared. So I guess that should be 49. But this isn't a case where start is greater than end, so I guess it should return 49. I should be allowed to ask for a range where the range only has size 1. And we'll scroll down, and there it is, 49. Nope, there it is, 49. What other cases can I think of? Okay, I can think of one really strange one, which is, what if I work with negative numbers? And I will deliberately choose the sort of mirror image of one we did earlier. The squares of -3 up to -1. Let's reason through this. So -3 squared plus -2 squared plus -1 squared. Okay, well that actually equals 9 plus 4 plus 1, which equals 14, just like earlier. And that's because of the way that squares work. The square of a negative number is just the square of the positive version of that number. But this is valid, right? I mean, the start value is less than the end value. So I should be allowed to get away with this. I am allowed to use negative integers in C, so I need to test this out. Unless the function specifically says the numbers have to be positive, I need to test this out. So I think the answer here should be 14. I'll give this a try. And it is, fortunately. And so we need to test on cases like this. Otherwise, we don't know whether the function is going to work. We can't just assume. And we have to try and, think ahead of our opponents. We have to think, the people that are going to use my function, my small appliance, once I'm done making it, they could be using this for years. Hundreds of people could use this. We need to try and get inside their heads and think about what they're going to do. I guess I have one more case I should test, which is, what if I go from 0 squared up to, let's say 2 squared. What if I have 0 as one of the endpoints of my range? So 0 up to 2. Okay, so what's that? Well, okay, 0 squared plus 1 squared plus 2 squared is 0 plus 1 plus 4, which is equal to 5. So that should be 5. All right, we'll give that a try. We'll save the file, and then we'll give it a try. And it's 5. Okay, so I think I've now done enough testing that I can be confident my function generally works pretty well. I still might want to try a few more cases to make sure it works if I'm doing a range that's a bit longer, or maybe a few more with negative numbers. But this looks a little bit more like comprehensive testing than what I had at the beginning. And starting on assignment 3, it's your responsibility to make sure your code is well tested. Certainly, you need to write code that works, but it's not up to us to provide you necessarily completely exhaustive testing. Of course, until we get to the testing database part of the assignment. But before the initial deadline, you should be able to generate your own testing. And if you develop that skill early, it can really help save you later.